one of the world's largest gold hubs. Now, this raises urgent questions. Who is buying all this gold and why? Is it private institutions, foreign governments, or is it even the U.S. Treasury itself? One theory gaining attraction in the U.S. government is preparing for a full-scale audit of the gold reserve in Fort Knox, an event that could reshape global monetary systems here. Now, high-profile voices such as Elon Musk, Senator Rand Paul, and former presidential candidate Ron Paul, who we recently had on this show, well, they've all demanded a full independent audit of Fort Knox, which has not been inspected for more than 50 years. Now, Musk even suggested live streaming the audit to ensure full transparency. Well, with all these developments, what does it mean for the future of the U.S. dollar, global trade, and, of course, gold itself? Here to break it all down is Peter Grandich, a veteran in financial markets. Peter has managed hedge funds, advised major institutions, and authored Confessions of a Wall Street Whiz Kid. He's also the founder of PeterGrandich.com, a leading voice in the gold and commodities space. Peter, welcome back to the show. Great to see you.
A good time to be interested in gold.
Yeah, you're not kidding. And it's funny because there's still a lot of news outlets that are not covering the moves in gold. But of course, let's do it here and start with something a little bit critical. Right now, the U.S. government officially values its gold reserves at just under $45 an ounce, a number that hasn't changed in decades. Meanwhile, spot gold trades nearly $3,000 an ounce, making new records in the open market. Why hasn't the U.S. adjusted the book value of its gold holdings here, Peter?
Well, I think it's part of the fact that finally business people are at the helm at the moment at this country. Let's face facts. Donald Trump was a business person first, long before he was a politician. And Musk, I think, to me, Musk is the Einstein of business for the 21st century. And he's just a phenomenally man with such brilliance and, be able to do so many different things. I still can't believe they land that rocket back onto the pad each time.
Yeah.
About what that takes. So I think that's the one reason. And I think also there was a plan to monetize as much of the asset base that they can because the debt is so huge. And obviously, with gold being valued at the books at $42, it doesn't make any sense to keep it at that level. So I find it interesting. I will say this, when you talked about an audit, and even having it live, as long as it's not Geraldo Rivera going to open it up, because the last time he did that, nothing was there, and we don't want to see that nothing is at Fort Knox. Yeah,
we definitely don't want to see that. We will revisit this one, but I'm curious, there's a lot of this talk. We've seen it this past weekend, on X. Elon Musk obviously giving a lot of attention to it as well. Could we see an official revaluation of gold to reflect real market prices at what's making new highs this year?
Yeah, I think that's coming. I think that's part of it. I don't think what people should do, Jeremy, is confuse what's been transpiring up to a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. The serious purchasing by central banks to a few weeks ago had nothing to do with what's happening. This is a separate issue that's taken transpire. Those banks were buying because they were preparing for what they view as an eventual change in the world monetary system, partly because of what's transpiring with BRICS. And as much as Trump wants to threaten that he's going to break their kneecaps if they continue, I think they will. But this movement is more, I think, related to the U.S. and what it plans on doing with its gold holdings. And therefore, I believe we will get that revaluation. And it makes sense because it does kick in almost $1 trillion of paying down some debt by the higher level of our gold holding. What I don't think is what people should be concerned about, and every once in a while I get an email still about it. Does this mean they're going to sell the gold? I think that's the last choice of theirs, to sell the gold. Look at countries that did and how they're hurting now. Unfortunately, your country, Canada, did it, and I think they would like to have the gold back that they had sold.
Yeah. I think a lot of politicians wishing that they could go back in time here. OK, let's stick on this theme, because if gold were to be revalued, as you just mentioned, and we talked about this overpowering debt problem in the U.S., could it help stabilize America's debt to GDP ratio, perhaps? Is that part of the plan?
My opinion is this is just a pause. When I hear there's a lot of good things Trump has done. One thing you can say about Trump, whether you love him or you hate him, what he says he was going to do, he does. Very few politicians after they're elected percentage-wise, do as much as he's already done for what he said he was going to do before he was elected. But one of the comments that he's made continuously, that eventually this and other things and a Bitcoin reserve, strategic reserve, will somehow eliminate the debt. To the amount of discretionary income we would have to suddenly make as Americans to meet all our necessary bills and have extra money to pay down 36 trillion is beyond impossibility. That's why the eventual reset in the world and what central banks are doing, recognizing not just our debt. This is not just a U.S. problem. Large-scale national debt is throughout the Western world and even in China. So it goes to us, it at least makes those of us who pounded the table about gold for the last 10 or 20 years proven correct all along for much lower prices, that it would prove to be the number one asset that people would look to as the debt would get worse and worse.
Yeah, you mentioned that national debt problem there, and it's surpassed its $36 trillion mark. I know the Congressional Budget Office warning that by 2031, almost every dollar of tax revenue could be consumed by interest payments and mandatory spending. Now we're seeing from this last meeting with the Fed, they're now signaling concerns over another debt ceiling crisis. Some officials are suggesting a pause in balance sheet runoff, currently allowing $25 billion in treasuries, $35 billion in mortgage-backed securities to mature monthly. Adding to the uncertainty, Donald Trump has backed a plan from House Republicans to raise the debt ceiling by $4 trillion. But again, negotiations could take months. Peter, how do you see this debt ceiling standoff playing out here?
Well, I wish they get rid of that wording, because 120-something times it hasn't worked. The ceiling has gone through. The problem we have is, you make a very good point, Jeremy. The Congressional Budget Office says that we are going to hit $54 trillion in debt at the rate that we're going at. Well, if you just put a 5% interest rate at that point, we'd be talking over half of what we took in as a nation in our best year 2 years ago, just going to pay interest. We could not operate the rest of the country as we've grown accustomed to. So we also must say that one of the negatives that I find about Trump at the moment is just about everybody is not going to pay taxes, just no matter who you are. Well, how are we going to do all of that and not pay taxes and yet be able to pay this all off? And no one's really asking about that point, because we're in a sense, we're somewhat stunned. I think people are really, some are happily stunned to see how much waste and potential trillions of dollars that has gone out the door. But to believe somehow all that's going to be stopped, to put on the right side of the ledger, and then be able to pay such a huge amount of debt off anytime soon, I think is a falsehood.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch these numbers continue to climb on the debt front. And we're also seeing it when we get back to the gold and silver front. We're seeing unprecedented movement of gold from London into the U.S. The numbers are staggering, Peter. We got 12.5 ounces of gold, 40 million ounces of silver have been delivered into COMEX vaults since November of 2024. JP Morgan is reportedly set to deliver $4 billion worth of gold for February COMEX contracts. Meanwhile, in China, banks are continuing to sell out of gold due to overwhelming demand. South Korea Mint has temporarily halted gold bar sales. What do you make of this massive transfer of gold into the U.S.?
I think it's part of this strategic use of gold that Trump plans, but I think it's bigger than that. Now, I must tell you, I've been part of a group for 20 years, and for a lot of those years, a certain person used to call us tinfoil hat folks, because not only did we speak about the manipulation that was going on, which subsequently was proven, but we talked about how much gold has been lent out and lent out multiple times, to the point where if ever that gold was originally called back, it could cause a domino effect. And I believe that's part of it. The good news in all of this, which gold bulls like myself should be well satisfied, is we no longer have the manipulators in the paper market that were basically in London and New York. They're done. They recognize they can no longer just short the paper market and keep it down in the press. Look, even when we have a $30 or $50 down day, years ago, Jeremy, it took weeks, sometimes months to make that up. Now we make it up in hours or a day or two. So the physical demand and the physical gold market now has finally overridden the paper market once and for all. And I think that also is bullish for long-term gold. And the thing that shocks me still is the general financial service industry, at least in the U.S. here, yawns at gold. There's real no interest or holdings yet, and that's why I think the market still has a much further way to go, because we haven't seen the general public involved in the gold market in any major way. No disrespect to what Kitco does and those who are smart enough to be getting people in hundreds of dollars lower, but the vast majority of people in the United States have little or no ownership of gold.